we're going to look at how to add outlines to lettering very quickly. And something to keep in mind is that all of the techniques that I'm showing in the program to add outlines to lettering can also be used to add outlines to anything else that's been created in the Generations program. The first thing I need to do is, of course, create lettering, which I have right here. I have ABC uppercase and ABC lowercase. The next thing I need to do is to select what I want to have a border created around it. Now I can do that a couple of different ways. If I just want to select one item or one letter to be outlined, I can move the mouse over and just right-click on that letter. You can see it's selected with flashing lines. If I want to have all of the letters outlined, since they're all one color, I could move over to the color chip and just left-click on that to select it. You can see all of the letters are now selected with the flashing lines. Or if I want to select everything or a section of things, I can do another way of selection. I can move my mouse up above the lettering, press and hold the right mouse button, and just drag around the areas or letters that I want to have an outline created on. So I want to create an outline on all of these letters, so let's go ahead and left click on the color chip, and they're all selected. Now I'm going to go to the object properties, and I'm going to use a real quick option to create outline around my letters, and that's called Use Border. So on the Basic tab, I can place a check mark in Use Border, and then I can edit some of the settings for this border. So let's click on the Edit button and look at what our settings are. Now this outline is a satin or column stitch outline only, and I have a couple of things that I can change on it. The default setting is to all borders. If I'm outlining lettering, that's a good default setting to have, because you can see the A and the B and even the lowercase a and b, they have these inside closed areas. So those are my inside borders. If I did outside border only, I would outline around the A, but not inside of the A or any of the other letters. So let's go ahead and leave it at all borders. Your border width, if you're doing this, will be at a default of 1. I can change this border width, and I made mine 2, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 2. And you can see the note here, if I make it 0, I can actually create a triple run around this. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 2 and say OK. And then just say OK again to apply that border. Let me zoom in so you can see what kind of border it's created. It's just a small satin stitch border, 2 millimeters wide. You can see 1 millimeter is going towards the inside and 1 millimeter is going towards the outside of the outline, so it balances that outline fairly well. Okay, now I want to do another type of border, so let me go ahead and select these again, and I just remove the check mark here to remove that border. When you create a border with the Use Border option, just bear in mind that it's going to sew immediately after the letter, and it's going to be the same color as the letter. And the only option I have is to change it to 0 for a triple, or to increase the satin width to the desired width for the letter. Okay, let's look at another way to outline our letters. I'm going to go ahead and just right click and hold that mouse button and drag around the letters to select them. And then I'm going to use another option from the main menu called Stitch. When I click on Stitch, I have the option to create an outline from area edges. When I select that option, I have a lot more options available to me. I can select my line type. I can say outside, inside, or all borders. And I can control the satin width here, but I also have an offset option. So let's look at what happens when we do a satin border. I'm going to do all borders, and I'm going to change the width to 2, and then say OK. Now the stitches are there, you can see the flashing outlines, but they haven't generated yet. So before they generate, if I want it to be 2 color, I'm just going to click a new color. And you can see there's my 2 color border. What's nice about this is that the stitches are still balanced. If I look at this in View Outline, you can see no additional lines because my outline is balanced right on the edge here of the area. And what happens is, if my border was 2 millimeters, 1 millimeter is going on the outside and 1 millimeter is going on the inside, so it's a nice balanced stitch and I'm not going to have any gapping. Okay, so that is a satin border. Now let's look at one of the other options. I'm going to go ahead and undo the border, and let's go back and create a different border. Let's go to Stitch, Create Outline from Area Edges, and let's try using a triple run. Now, of course, I would want to do all of the borders, and I might want to change my offset to -0.1, which is a very small percentage, and say OK. And I'm going to change my color again. And what that did was set that just barely inside the outline. So if I look at this in outline view, it's really difficult to see because it's such a small amount. But my border's there, and it's slightly set on the edge just to make sure that I have no gapping, as it outlines these letters, right? Now let's look at what the offset does. I'm going to get rid of this and select everything, and we'll look at Stitch, Create Outline. I'm going to go ahead and say let's do a triple run, and we're going to offset this by 2 millimeters. All borders, and let's change the color. You can see it's moved that outline away from the lettering by 2 millimeters. So let's go ahead and look at what going the other way does. Stitch and Create Outlines. We'll go triple run, and we'll say -2. All borders, and let's change the color again. And you can see it's moved it inside. Right, so that's a couple of quick ways to outline your lettering and, make things a little more interesting as well. But that offset, besides being, able to echo out or to, insert the outline inside the letters, that offset really has a function, and the function is to allow you to offset that a little bit at a -0.1 or, higher if you want, so that you have no gapping in your lettering, especially for satin stitch stitching. Now there are some other options that you can do with your lettering that really are not quite an outline but can make things a little bit interesting. So if I select everything and I go up to Accessories, I can use what's called Create Shadows. While this isn't an outline, what it's going to do is add another color underneath these letters. You can see here's the width, how wide do I want this. I can control the direction of where the shadow is going to go. And here's my shadow color, so I can, actually make this any color that I want. We'll go ahead and make it orange. The reverse compensation is the compensation that's coming underneath once that shadow is created. Okay, so this is what our shadow is going to look like. Let me go ahead and just adjust that a little bit. You can see the preview as I adjust. So let's go ahead and say OK and generate. And what's going to happen is the orange is created first, and then the blue is on top of it. So I'm going to get rid of the blue just so you can see what the orange looks like. So it's not really quite an outline, but it does add a little bit of interest to your lettering. And what's nice is I can do this multiple times if I want, the same as I can do my satin stitching or my borders. Just because you've done a border or a shadow once doesn't mean you can't select those letters and do it a second time to create a little bit of a unique shadow or a little bit of a unique outline.